Hello everyone. Today we're going to talk about a passive DNS tool hosted by Mnemonic. I actually have this open in the browser in front of you, and it is PassiveDNS.mnemonic.no. Now, passive DNS and using passive DNS for investigations is one of the more common tasks for intelligence analysts, cybersecurity specialists, and SOC engineers, and so on. In fact, it's fair to say that investigating DNS and using passive DNS in some fashion for research or to chase down or investigate something is a good 20% or more tasks you'll do in the future if you're within one of those roles or one like it. So why this tool over another, or perhaps better said, who is Mnemonic? Mnemonic is a company that has multiple products that are situated on endpoints and inside of networks. They also let their technology get integrated into numerous other tools, such as at a firewall or in other parts of your security structure. And they have a passive DNS portion that they opened up as part of their research to kind of further the industry. And so that gives us access to passive DNS info in a way that we may not have otherwise. And we can use it to make observations. In this case, we're seeing specifically in the passive DNS things that their Argus managed defense system, which is kind of a suite of products that they have, has made in the past. And it's very key to understand that we're only seeing a partial digest of passive DNS because it's very difficult to get a global worldwide view of passive DNS. And secondly, that we're only seeing TLP white observations. Now, if you're not familiar with the TLP or traffic light protocol, I provided a link in the description about TLP designations. But just as a quick and simple definition, it's roughly a schema for indicating when and how sensitive info can be shared. Now, it seems wise to touch on passive DNS here. So passive DNS is a way to opportunistically reconstruct a partial view. Again, key important here, partial view of data available in the global domain name system into a centralized area, preferably a database that can be then indexed and queried. And there's a lot of reasons why you'd want access to that. Key one would be that right now when a DNS record changes globally, it's gone. Anything that the previous value is gone. So if I had something assigned to one IP and I change it, that previous IP is not retained anywhere unless you keep passive DNS data. And there's a variety of entities that do that. Argus being, the Mnemonic here being one of them. And you can use it to do a lot of things. For example, find patterns in data, use predictive analysis to uncover attacks. In fact, if you think about it, you can find a lot of useful information if you can retain historical data. As a key example, you can see the date that a domain A record changed, what it was before and what it is now. Perhaps seeing that multiple times will give you a pattern of activity and help point out where, say, an attacker might be comfortable moving infrastructure around from and to. In fact, on that topic, unlike querying live records, which can kind of give away your actions, querying passive DNS can avoid alerting bad actors from seeing what you're doing. But kind of as a quick core set of questions that you can use passive DNS to answer, you can look to see where a domain or host name pointed to in the past, what other domain names are hosted on a given name server or on an IP address, what domain names might point to a given IP, what subdomains might exist there, maybe even find domains that exist similar to your brand. So there's a key total large number of uses for this, but nothing beats examples. So let's just do one. In fact, they're saying, hey, we should use mnemonic.no as an example. So let's do that. So Mnemonic. I always have to spell this one because it's really hard for me. So I'll type that in and hit enter, and you'll see that the Mnemonic is nice in that they give you your history immediately, and you're going to see that's going to grow as we query and look at things. And then they give you a very simple breakdown of their passive DNS observations for mnemonic.no. Now, it's broken down in a couple columns. I'm going to touch on those real fast here. So the record type, so you get to see what's an A record, a pointer record, and so on. If these are not familiar, go look up the video that I've done on what common DNS records are. And then it's going to say, hey, query, and then, of course, answer. Now, these are tied together, of course, and it's important that you keep them in mind. So when they're talking about this, the way to kind of phrase this in your head is, it's asked the question of what IP is mnemonic.no setting on, and it got an answer. Now it asked that same question again down here and got a second answer, and we'll get into the other columns and explain why there's more than one. And it also said, hey, this pointer record points to what? And the answer, of course, is mnemonic.no. So you can kind of phrase all these in your head in nice ways so you understand what you're seeing. Now, I want to talk about first seen and last seen real quick because they can be confusing at a glance, because it seems like the system might be saying, hey, I first saw that at this date and I last saw it interact with my system on this last seen date. But that's not quite true. What this is implying is it was first seen, or the first registered timestamp for this record. So the first time it saw a registered timestamp for this record was on this date, 2017, in January 2017. The last time it saw that was on 12 July 2021. So that makes sense. That's the most recent record and most recent registered timestamp for that record. Versus this one down here, which is an older reference to a different IP, which was first observed, first seen in 2012, and then last seen in 2015. So again, we're looking at historical or passive data for historical events. So it's something to keep in mind that mnemonic.no previously pointed to this IP address, but stopped pointing, at least as far as Argus is concerned, in 2015. And then it saw a registration and update for that in 2017. So it's important to kind of keep these two in mind. This number of times is kind of similar to first seen and last seen. Just keep in mind the context of what they're trying to say. But specifically, this is the number of times this record has been observed by the Argus defense system here. And it's been seen quite a few times on this particular IP, which makes sense because Mnemonic, this is their tool, and less so on some of these other ones. So there's some things that can be implied here, but it's key to remember you're also seeing TLP white data only, so there may be other things under higher parts of the TLP protocol that's not visible here. And lastly, TTL is time to live, so how fast the record updates. This is in seconds, so 600 is 5 minutes, and so on. 688 is kind of an oddball one, so I would poke at that if that was me, but I have no idea why it's structured that way. But it is within realm. If this was smaller, even lower, like under 100 or even under 300, I would be looking at it with a different eye. But we know that mnemonic.no is clean, at least at the moment. Now, some things you can do here. Again, the core of this is going backwards and understanding what happened historically. So a typical use of this tool is to reverse search or investigate what host names or associations exist for an IP or a name server or something similar. So we can't quite see name servers here in this view. This is where adding this in with another tool really shines, but I'll cover that in a separate video. One of the things we might want to know is what else happens to be on this IP address. So they're really handy in that you can click on that and it'll tell you a little bit of information. And so they're saying that on this IP address are 6 items, all of which map to mnemonic, and all of which kind of make sense if you look at it. And of course you have all these times that it's been observed. And you can continue to follow these. So clicking this again would not be helpful, but you could reconstruct the back history from first seen and last seen. You could also click on this, the host name, and see if it gives you any other additional information. Like in this case, mnemonic.co.uk is not only on this IP address, but it's also setting on these other two. And you can see when that occurred. So this was in 2017, this is a 2018, only seen that year, and this is the most recent one. So historically, this is the most recent going backwards. And you could follow these and see if other things are on there if you wanted. Now, you can't hit the back button simply, but you can jump around. So let's back up one. Who else is current? Mnemonic.se, let's check them out. They're only on this IP address. Awesome. Anybody else? Doesn't look like it. Active. That's IO. Okay. So mnemonic.io is on this IP address, but it's also on this IPv6 address and this other IPv4. They're not currently there though. See, that's where you have to check out these other columns. This is the most recent. Historically, it was very short. Oh, I must have clicked something. Let's go back here. So kind of just to make sure you understand this. So you have A records and then quad A here, which are IPv4 records. This is the most recent because that's when it was last seen or observed, followed by these in declining order. Now this, you'd have to go profile what that actual IP address is. but I bet that's a Cloudflare or something similar. This one also wouldn't surprise me. 2018 to 2020, 2019 to 2020, and then a bunch of changes, and then this is our current one. You can sort of see some handoff times, so you can kind of poke around here and gather some passive DNS information. Let's look at something a little more malicious or suspicious. This is one that I pulled from one of the dailies, so you might look at that and go Envoy Career.com. That's a reference to obviously something in the aviation industry. It's sitting on this address. You can see it's got a www, so it's got a CNAME record pointing back to it, and it's on this IP. It's been seen a couple times. All right, it's got a long time to live, which is good. Let's see what else is on this IP address. Okay, so earn with high income skills, but here's jobs at Mayo Clinic, here's Walmart funds. Yeah, you've got a fisher or someone who's decided to squat on a bunch of domains today, all in this particular IP. Now, quick note, it's only showing 25 rows. There's 257 items that it's observed on this IP. It's only observed them a couple of times. If we scroll through here, you can get some sense on what, there's a lot of aircraft references on this IP. Spirit Air, Frontier Air, on the 5th, so a couple days past, Aerotech, Skyjob. So this is someone who's put together quite a few lookalike domains for aviation industry companies, probably for bad reasons. And then looks like you got a mix of a couple other ones in here. Let's see what's on the next page. Oh, we got some healthcare. SkyWest again, that's aviation. I don't know this one, but Hippo, interesting. Here's a steakhouse. Get American Forgive and Relief. So there's a number of things in here that you can find. So if I were doing reverse searching or more RDNS kind of research, I would table all these, organize the IPs, figure out what ASs belong to whom, continue to make linkages to who created these domains, and probably cluster them to figure out what they're focused on as far as targeting, and then know where they're coming from as far as the IP areas are. And then I would do more research on who owns this IP and how it's being used. Is it something that is kind of a dumping ground for newly registered sites, or does this IP represent a infrastructure that someone has acquired and they have it statically assigned to them? You know, there's many options there. So that would be next steps after organizing everything to understand what they're targeting. And then when these all kind of came into being, they're all very much the same time frames, within days. So this looks like something that, you know, is purposeful, and so it would be, you know, something more to chase down. But let's do one more. Let's see here. Let's chase this down. So let's do Alvik, how do you say it properly? This one has a lot more assignments, many of which are fairly current, if not most current. So this is a IPv6 263. Here's another IPv6. We got several IPv4 assignments, even more. So there's been a lot of churn on this one, I'd say. So let's look at the most recent one. And this particular IPv6 has some other friends. MSP speed test, okay. And a couple other items. Frankly, IT Live. You can chase the domain name and look at what else is on there. It's got a couple assignments as well. And really, you can just continue on. The idea is with this one, you can do passive DNS research and kind of chase and follow and find what you're looking for, and kind of organize it and understand how things are linked. It is, in the scheme of things, not the most optimal tool to do mass searching by any means, but if you have a need and you need a free tool that will give you background very quickly, Mnemonic's Passive DNS tool is exactly what you need. It'll get you the information that you need fairly quickly. It'll give you the nubs that you need to go do additional research and kind of give you insight into a lot of information so that you can further understand what you're trying to chase down. So thank you for your time, and hopefully you'll find this Passive DNS tool from Mnemonic useful in your research. If you have a more handy internal or external tool that you use for this, the techniques that we talked about, that touched on at least, are applicable across the board. And when I go into the reverse searching tutorial, then I'll come back to Mnemonic and a couple other tools, and we'll compare and contrast as well, so you can understand each one's kind of advantage and disadvantage. So thank you for your time today, and I hope that you will follow us on our YouTube channel as we go into more and more of these and explore with folks that are in the apprentice program the different tools that we have in our industry that we use to do research with. Thank you for your time.